Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This week on the Quarterdeck, in our reading of our book, With the 1st Marine Division in Iraq of 2003, No Greater Friend, No Worst Enemy, we continue our review on the operational planning, the updates that the division continues to make in order for them to ensure that this plan that they have in place is not only going to look good on paper, but it's going to be great when the division executes it. And we move on that this week as a division takes the gift that was given to them from the other services of being able to utilize Highway 1 to conduct their plan in the movement all the way into Baghdad. In our hero highlights this week, we take a look at the life of Private First Class Harold Glenn Epperson, United States Marine Corps, and his story that led him to receiving the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Drop and give me 25. I'm the gunny.
It's time for the gunning.
The Quarterdeck. Lights. Get online right now. You got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hello, my bunch of knuckle-dragging, beer-drinking, hard-charging devil dogs. You're listening to The Quarterdeck. I am your host, Miguel, the Gunny Signs.
Get off the bus!
I do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend
The Constitution of the United States.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
The Quarterdeck. You guys believe it? It's already March 16th. We're already in the middle of the month. Man, how is time freaking flying so damn fast that we're already getting closer and closer to the middle of the damn year? I don't know what it is. Time is just flying so much faster. Maybe it's because we spent the whole 2020 inside of our house locked up and stuff, that now that we are free as a bird, our time is flying so much faster and it makes our days just run together. Or maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me because I spend so much time at home now that my days just run together, run into one, and I'm not used to doing something with all the time that I have available to me now. But that's okay because it allows me to spend more time with my family, and that ultimately, that's what retirement from being active duty service, that's ultimately what it is, to ensure that you are stable and have a good life in order to be able to actually spend all that time now that you have available to spend it with your family. Last week, we were talking about Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and how there's nothing to do there. Lawton. What can I tell you guys so much about Lawton, Oklahoma? There's nothing there. There's nothing to do. Nothing, not that I want to take anything away from all the people that live in Lawton, Oklahoma, or anybody that's stationed there at Fort Sill. I mean, it's a base. And yes, I call it a base. I know it's an army, whatever they call it, fort or whatever they call them there, but I don't care. It's still a base to me, and that is what I called it every time that I spoke to anybody or anything regarding that place where I was attached to the Marine Corps detachment. But what I want to talk about this week is a topic that was actually brought up. And it was brought up by a friend of mine on TikTok, actually, that they were talking about the time that we, as Marines, did not roll our sleeves up. And it seems like just yesterday, but it is true. It is true. The Marine Corps is known for their sleeve rolls. And not because everybody gets time to show off their guns. You know, they get to roll up their sleeves because of daylight savings time. In the summertime, we always rolled up our sleeves to ensure that we had short sleeve utility uniforms. And that was a norm ever since I came into the service. I can remember that our drill instructors, it was actually Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant Watkins. And if you haven't heard some of my podcasts prior to me talking about them, you guys can go back and listen to my stories that I have of my drill instructors and what it was like going through actual recruit training. But back to the sleeves. So I was taught at a very young age in my Marine Corps career how to properly roll sleeves. And throughout the years, you know, I perfected and I mastered the way that I wanted my sleeves rolled up to ensure that they looked the best that they can possibly could once it was time for us to actually roll our sleeves. And this goes back to the days of wearing the tricolor camis and Some of you guys listening to me are like, damn, you're old. And yes, I guess you can consider me a dinosaur from back in the days. But yes, the tricolor utility uniform that we wore were the same ones that you actually saw during Vietnam, the brown, black, and green colored utility uniform. And that's one of the most iconic ones that I guess you can look back on, that so many people actually understand and remember whenever they see any kind of military service member, that they have that there, because the Marine Corps, the Army, it was basically the same uniform that we wore. But I was taught how to roll my sleeves. So during MCT, during Fort Sill, if I was going to be there during daylight savings time, then I was going to have to roll my sleeves. So that was one of the good times that we were expecting, and we look forward to actually rolling our sleeves up to have a little cooler uniform that we were going to be able to wear. But during that time, and the exact time that I can't remember, I know that it ended in 2014, 13 or 14, because I was in Fort Sill when that changed again. But we were so used to rolling our sleeves up, and then during the winter months, whenever we wore our other camis, which it was summertime, we wore our, I can't remember, I think it was our deserts. We wore desert uniforms during the summer. And in the winter, we switched over to our green, our Marpat uniform. And back then with tricolor, it was just one uniform. We had tricolors and that's all we wore. But whenever we switched over to the new Digi pattern, the new digital Marpat pattern, it was the deserts and the greens. So summertime, we were wearing our deserts, and in the winter, we wore our greens. And this, went on and on and on, all the way to the depot. We taught our recruits how to roll sleeves and all those things that were put into place. But then, when all this happened, that they were saying that they wanted to make even the Marines in garrison be more like the Marines that were deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan, because of course, over there in a combat environment, you never rolled your sleeves up because you wanted to ensure that you had the protection from the sun on your arms. And during that time, the Commandant of the Marine Corps decided that it would make more sense to have all the Marines have their sleeves down year round. Well, okay, yeah, good, fine and dandy, because you didn't have to worry about rolling your sleeves, because I can tell you guys, there are some Marines out there that have no idea how to properly roll their sleeves. And back then when I was a sergeant, young staff sergeant, we used to always joke around, with our gunnery sergeants and above, that they had what they called gunny rolls. And I mean, these sleeves were rolled to below the elbows, and that was their rolls of sleeves. Now, whenever I became a gunny and I was promoted to gunnery sergeant, there's no way in hell that I was going to be one of those gunnies and have my sleeves down to my elbows. I always ensured that my sleeves were all the way up to the top. They were nice and sexy, as I called them, and ensure they were properly rolled nice and tight to ensure that they looked presentable, because you wanted to set the example for your Marines to make sure that you had the kind of sleeves that you'd be proud of to, show off your arms now that you had that stuff. And it was also during this time that you were able to realize to see if anybody got any new tattoos during the time that the sleeves were down. And tattoo policy, that's a whole different issue. We'll talk about that in a whole another episode, because it was a whole another issue that we as Marines have to deal with. And even today, some of those things are changing. They're becoming more relaxed. They're becoming more strict. And that's another whole another topic. But let's talk more about our sleeves. So recently, I won't say recently, it was like back in 2014 that it came into play again with a new MAR admin that came out, stating that now the Marines were going to be able to actually roll their sleeves up. So when daylight savings times came up, they would have to roll their sleeves, and that is the way that we were going to be. Well, here's the thing. When I was down in Fort Sill as an instructor, I was actually the battery gunnery sergeant down there at the Marine Barracks, where all the Marines were there to go to all their training, their schools. Now, it didn't dawn on us till like about 2 days prior to everybody having to roll their sleeves. Now, us that have been in for a while, we had no issue. Okay, whatever. We're happy to roll our sleeves back up. But then we started talking about it. My first sergeant and I actually sat down and like, holy shit. Like, these Marines have no idea how to roll a damn sleeve. They weren't taught in recruit training. They weren't taught in MCT, because that was the normal, that everybody wore sleeves down year round. So the night prior to that, we had a big giant get together with all the Marines. And I showed them how to properly roll their sleeves. And I had them bring a blouse with them down to the classroom area to ensure that they understood how to roll their sleeves. So the next morning when they got up in the morning, they didn't look all freaking silly and disgusting with sleeves that looked like they freaking slept in them. And they had no idea what the heck they were doing, especially as being on an Army base. We wanted to make sure that, the Marines look better than the Army recruit, or not. I can't even call them a recruit because I don't even consider them to be recruits. They're freaking privates or whatever the hell they call them down there in basic training, because they don't even rate to be called recruit training. And that's in my opinion. So they don't rate that yet. I wanted to make sure that they understood how to properly roll their sleeves to ensure that they looked presentable when they actually left from the barracks to go to chow, to their schoolhouses. And we had a discussion with all the instructors in the schoolhouses as well to ensure that they discussed that with the Marines while they were in class, and if they had time as well to go over again how to properly actually roll the sleeves so they would look more presentable, especially during those times. Now, of course, whenever they went out there to the field to do any of their training, they had to actually roll those sleeves back down. So they needed to make sure that they were able to understand how to properly roll them back up. But once they came back to the field, because at the end of the day, when they were done with all their training at the schoolhouses, they would take them to chow, bring them back to the barracks, and then they would be turned over to us to either secure them for evening liberty or so, or anything like that, to make sure that they were all ready to go. So that was very, very important to ensure that they understood that. And, it really slipped our mind, because to us, it was just normal, whatever. We'll roll our sleeves, we'll be ready to go, and then we'll carry out what the plan of the day. But these were young Marines that had just basically graduated from recruit training and MCT, and they sent it straight to us. And they have no clue, especially if they were never taught. How the hell do we expect them to do the things correctly if they were never taught those things? But like I told them, okay, I'm taking my time and I'm teaching you one time. So I expect you to be proficient on how to do it properly now that you have actually been taught. And, it turned out okay, because they actually learned and understood exactly that they needed to do it correctly the first time to make sure that they had that. And of course, we had those Marines that we had there that would come back and see us and like, excuse me, Gunnery Sergeant, would you mind showing me again how to roll my sleeves properly? Because I want to make sure that they look right and that I don't embarrass you when I leave the actual barracks. And, those are Marines that took the time, and I wanted to make sure that they had it done correctly. Now, I didn't say it in those words, but I made sure that they learned how to actually roll those sleeves properly. So they were set up for success once they left, and especially once they left us and they headed out to the actual fleet. We wanted to make sure that out in the fleet, they knew how to do this, because, we didn't want them to say, well, the hell, they didn't teach them anything down there in Oklahoma now that they're leaving here and joining us in the fleet. Because to me, the Marine Corps pride, the Marine Corps is very, very important. And we want to make sure that we continue with our traditions, our heritage, and all those things. And all these young Marines that are coming now, especially through Fort Sill when I was down there as an instructor, it's important that we pass on that knowledge, those traditions, so they carry on with the same traditions that I came up on while I was still on active duty in the Marine Corps. But I don't know how this topic came up, because the way that it came out was just that, who remembers during this time when we actually had sleeves down the whole entire time? And to me, that was just like nothing I really ever thought about. But yeah, it's true, because a lot of the Marines that were out there in the fleet never rolled their sleeves at all whatsoever. They had no idea how to do this. So I can just imagine how it was in the fleet during that time, where all these Marines were freaking showing up there with sleeves that were straight up heinous. And the staff NCOs, the NCOs, would have to ensure that they knew how to do that. Well, wait a second. But yeah, the staff NCOs and the NCOs, a lot of them weren't even taught that as well, because the way the promotion system was, you were getting promoted like it was cool, all the way up to the rank of staff sergeant in a lot of MOSs. So a lot of them had no idea how to do this stuff either. So dang, it would have to be like the gunnery sergeants, the gunnies, the first sergeants, the sergeants majors that actually taught these Marines how to properly do this stuff, because they had no idea how to roll their damn sleeves. So yeah, that's just one of the things that, that's changed throughout the years. But I am just so glad. I'm so glad that they decided to actually go back to allowing the Marines to actually roll their sleeves back up. And now we're actually, switching camis again from deserts to MARPAT, compared to just staying in the MARPAT uniform the whole entire time that you were, even if you were back in garrison and not even deployed. So yeah, that's just one of the things that, that came up, and I was thinking about, like, yeah, they're right. Those things have changed, and so many changes occurred throughout the years in the Marine Corps, and hell, in all the defensive forces, all the armed services. A lot of things have changed. I mean, just recently, the Army allows them to freaking have ponytails for all their females. They can wear ponytails in their camis. I don't know. I got to do some research regarding what the Marine Corps is planning on doing for our female Marines. How is that going to come into play? Are they going to give them more relaxed standards of the actual way that they wear their hair when they're in the uniform? So yeah, so many, many things have changed throughout the years. If you guys know of any of them or anything that you guys want to share with me, make sure you guys go to our Facebook page, The Quarterdeck with Gunny Signs. Leave your comments, any concerns or anything that you want to talk about, especially with uniform regulations. I know uniform regulations is a biggie. It's a big thing. But now we can start getting into the whole topic of tattoos, the good old tattoo policy, and how it has changed drastically since when I came in the Marine Corps back in 1995. So let me know. Go to our Facebook page, send us a comment, send us a message, leave us a message here on our actual podcasting pages to ensure that you get your question answered. And remember, you can always listen to us on any podcasting application that is out there. Just simply Google our podcast, The Quarterdeck with Gunny Signs, and you will be directed to all of our streaming services that are available for you to be able to listen to our podcast every single week. And don't forget to follow us to ensure that you are notified right away when a new episode has posted, so you don't miss a single episode. Are you looking for a photographer who can capture the most important moments in your life? Look no further than Miguel Signs Photography. Miguel Signs is an award-winning photographer with a passion for capturing the beauty and emotions of weddings, family portraits, and special events. With years of experience and a creative eye, Miguel Signs will create stunning images that you'll treasure for years to come. Whether you're looking for a traditional wedding album, a unique family portrait, or a professional headshot for your business, Miguel Signs Photography has the expertise to bring your vision to life. From the initial consultation to the final product, Miguel Signs will work with you every step of the way to ensure that your images reflect your unique style and personality. Don't settle for mediocre photographs that simply document an event. Trust Miguel Signs Photography to create timeless images that capture the essence of your special moments. Book your session today and experience the magic of Miguel Signs Photography. Visit Miguel Signs Photography online at miguelsignsphotography.com to see examples of his work and schedule your appointment today.
What we're gonna do right here is go back. Way back into time.
Last week in our reading with the 1st Marine Division in Iraq of 2003, No Greater Friend, No Worst Enemy, we talked about how the division came into a gift from the other services that allowed them to be able to use Highway 1 in their planning on how the division was going to go ahead and move from Kuwait all the way up into Baghdad. And this was a gift. They considered it to be a gift because it made their planning so much easier, because all the terrain that they were going to have to go through had just been eliminated. They were going to go through washes, through complete desert, all kinds of craziness. And I can remember when we did the planning, we were talking about how we were going to be going through all this terrain. I mean, it's terrain that we were kind of used to going through because we do all the training in 29 Palms. And we did training prior to actually deploying because we wanted to kind of mimic the same kind of terrain that we were going to be challenged with once we actually headed into Iraq. But this week we're going to talk about some more of the operational planning, an update to what the division was going to get put into place in order for them to have that success that they were planning on having now that they were getting ready to actually execute the plan that was finally put into place. The division planners immediately went to work to exploit the opportunity of running a seam between the enemy's defensive belt. The Highway 1 corridor stabs straight at the underside of Baghdad, perhaps opening up an attack route for the division to arrive in Baghdad even faster than previously thought possible. The Iraqis did not have any positional defenses blocking this route. In the enemy's eyes, The unfinished Highway 1 roadbed probably did not appear to be a credible attack corridor for American forces. Similar to many U.S. assessments, the narrow Highway 27, slicing into the northeast between the defensive belt of the enemy, probably seemed even less credible, as it went in the direction away from Baghdad. For the division, the opportunity to attack an unprepared enemy from an unexpected direction seemed too good to pass up. Finting an attack of Highway 1 would at least fix the median division in support of the U.S. V Corps, the CFLCC main effort. The plan offered better support to the main effort and an opportunity to achieve tactical surprise. By using Highway 1, the division could satisfy the CG's intent of offering alternative corridors for the RCT commanders, and could use the fix and bypass tactic and Baghdad Republican Guard divisions in Al Qut. Blue Diamond modified the attack plan to take advantage of the opportunity. RCT-1 attacking up Highway 7 corridor would telegraph the coalition's intent to move up the expected avenue of approach from An-Naziriyah to Al Qut. This would reinforce the Baghdad division's predestination to defend Al Qut to the south, effectively fixing the division in place. The Baghdad division was also prepared to defend against an unexpected coalition advance up Highway 6 from the east. By attacking the division by fires, it would drive the Iraqis to return fire with their own indirect fire systems, opening them up to detection by 11th Marines counter-battery radar. The subsequent destruction by 3rd MAW. While this occurred, RCT-5 would continue to attack up the unfinished Highway 1 to the limits of the division's battle space in order to pose a threat to Baghdad from the south. This would aid the main effort by forcing the Iraqis to commit forces to defend against the Marines' advance, making these troops unavailable to defend further west where the main American attack would come. The Iraqis were not expecting major advance up the unfinished highway and had made no discreditable preparations for its defense. The attack from the unexpected large force would have the effect of fixing the Medina RG Armored Division should it try to mass against the US V Corps. LAR would reinforce the deception of continuing to press along Highway 1 beyond the point where the rest of the division would turn to move against Baghdad RG Infantry Division and cross the Tigris River. RCT-5 would make the turn to the northeast on Highway 27, the secure crossing sites over the Tigris. RCT-7 would then pass through RCT-5 and also run the seam between the indirect fire fans of Iraqi defensive belts. Resupply would be conducted near Hantoush airfield once it was open for use by the 3rd MAW. Once across the river, RCT-7 would be in position to turn the Al Qut defense to the west and destroy the Baghdad RG division. The division would rapidly mass its combat power along Highway 6 and be in position to drive into Baghdad. Command and control of the division presented the planners with a different set of challenges. With 2 RCTs moving rapidly up Highway 1, the 3rd RCT moving along the Highway 7 axis, there was concern in some quarters that the division would not be able to maintain C2 of all 3 RCTs over extended operating distances as far as 100 kilometers. The G6 conducted extensive terrain studies and developed a detailed plan for the retransmission sites for all divisions' priority 1 radio nets, intelligence, fires, and maneuver. This analysis ensured that the reach of the division's line-of-sight communications capabilities was maximized. The division also supplemented the nets by utilizing HF radio, UHF tactical satellite radios, Smart Ts, Blue Force trackers, and Iridium satellite telephones to maintain communications, with the RCT CPs moving up to 2 routes. After doing the impossible for so long that it had become routine, The division communicators set themselves to task of laying out the C2 architecture that would allow the division to keep on its pace into Baghdad. Approximately 1 month later, these communicators would have to deal with the wrath of Mother Nature as well, as they successfully implemented the plan on the battlefield. Next week, we're going to take a look at the Eastern and Nasiriyah bridges and what the planning was going to be for that. The division had to update that strategy to see what they were going to do. Now, with communications, as the division was challenged with all the communication issues, they were talking about how they would have to deal with Mother Nature. And oh boy, deal with Mother Nature did we have to do. In the start of the whole operation, the sandstorms, the rain came into play. We'll get into that a little bit later on of how that issue was an issue. We'll discuss how that really was, because visibility. Aircraft were not allowed to fly because of the visibility and all the rain and the sandstorms that had come into play. Imagine rain with sand at the same time. I mean, this thing seemed like a clay storm. We talk about hailstorms down here in the United States. And oh boy, just imagine having lumps of clay being stuck to you, to your face. I mean, I can still taste the sand in my mouth now that I think about it. It was truly, truly an experience that I guess you really have to be there in order to understand what I'm trying to explain. I mean, living here in Arizona, we get somewhat of the same kind of experience. And oh man, talk about having flashbacks whenever we have any kind of sandstorms or stuff like that, because the sand is just everywhere. And back then, we were just kind of used to the weather that we had down there in 29 Palms. And I can't even remember having that kind of a sandstorm in 29 Palms that really compared to the issues that we dealt with down there in Iraq when we finally got into there. But communications was going to be an issue. It was going to be an issue because a lot of our communication that we dealt with was line of sight. That means you had to have line of sight for the frequency to actually travel through the airwaves and be received by another antenna. And that was going to be an issue because the distance that the division was going to be so great. So of course, retransmission sites, they talked about that greatly. Iridium phones. Can you imagine using a Iridium satellite phone to conduct military war operations? That was unheard of. To be able to use a satellite phone to call a fire mission, to get fire support into a target, because there was no other way of communicating back with the command post, the artillery units, our battalion, to be able to get the fire missions in place in order for the support to be there for our ground troops. Hero highlight. This week in our Hero Highlights, we take a look at the story of Private First Class Harold Glenn Epperson, United States Marine Corps. The Medal of Honor, America's highest military award, awarded posthumously to Private First Class Harold Glenn Epperson, was presented to his mother at Wright's Wednesday, 4 July 1945 in Tiger Stadium, Massillon, Ohio. PFC Epperson lost his life in action against the Japanese on Saipan on 25 June 1944, when he threw himself upon an enemy grenade in order to save the lives of his fellow Marines. The setting of the presentation was appropriate. The stadium, the Massillon High School band, and 8,500 of the townspeople, among whom the 20-year-old hero spent his childhood and youth before entering military service. The Medal of Honor was presented to PFC Epperson's mother by Colonel Norman E. True, District Marine Officer of the 9th Naval District and Commanding Officer of the Marine Barracks at Great Lakes, Illinois. PFC Epperson's parents, who moved to Mount Sterling, Kentucky, following their son's death, elected to return to Massillon for the ceremonies because they felt their son would have liked it that way. The citation signed by President Harry S. Truman and a letter from General Alexander A. Vandergrift, Commandant of the Marine Corps, were read by Colonel True during the ceremony. Private First Class Epperson graduated from Washington High School in 1943 and was employed at the Goodyear Aircraft in Akron, Ohio before entering the service. The USS Epperson, a destroyer bearing the hero's name, was launched 23 December 1945 in Port Newark, New Jersey. Initially buried in the 2nd Marine Division Cemetery on Saipan, Marianas Island, PFC Epperson's remains were re-entered into Winchester Cemetery, Winchester, Kentucky in 1948. The Quarterdeck. This week on the Quarterdeck, we continued our reading of our book, With the 1st Marine Division in Iraq of 2003, No Greater Friend, No Worst Enemy. And we talked about how the division was continuing their planning now that they had the Highway 1 corridor to their advantage on how they were actually going to plan and move into Baghdad so much faster. In our hero highlights, we talked about Private First Class Harold Glenn Epperson and the things that he did. And I don't know about you, but there's always a trend from all the Marines back from World War II, from World War I, all those time frames. Without any hesitation, without thinking about their own lives, they were quick to jump on top of a grenade to save the life of those Marines around them. And that's one of the great things about the Marine Corps. Marines are selfless. They would rather save the life of their fellow Marines to make sure that they're safe and they'll be able to go home to their families. Such was the case with this Private First Class Harold Glenn Epperson, and what he did in his story of his hero highlights. Our resources were verified by me using the Marine Corps University to get all the information, the details about all of our hero highlights. And of course, in our reading of our book, it is verified through the actual book that we cover every single week. Here's hoping that you enjoy the rest of your week. Have a great time with your family this weekend. Enjoy the nice weather. I don't know about you guys, but down here in Arizona, we've been getting to the 80s already. Nice, warm outside, not too hot. I did have to turn the AC on though because it got about 84 degrees inside of the house. So we want to make sure we stay cold. So I have it set to a nice whopping 78 degrees. It's still not too cold, but it's not hot. But it's a lot cooler inside the house than it is outside, so it makes it feel nice and comfortable. So until next week, this is Miguel, the Gunny Signs, sounding Liberty Call.
Get out the bus!
I do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend
The Constitution of the United States.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.